it's Annie Kramer, and at 5 seconds, I will open the quotations and give myself 15 seconds. Reading. In one of the most popular Disney Pixar movies, The Incredibles, we see the rise of one of the most infamous villains throughout the first and second film, Syndrome. Although he is then conquered at the end of the film, towards the middle of the portion, whenever he's showing the true monstrosity of his actions, it can be easy to acknowledge how difficult it is to perceive this man. This guy who grew up from just a little kid who was putting the responsibility of his actions all on Mr. Incredible, for the key's sake that he didn't give him the time of day. We can acknowledge that through the quotation, history teaches us that no other cause has brought us more death than the word of God by Gullian Bulza, French philosopher, is incorrect. Through the case of Syndrome, he was putting his actions on the word of someone else. He's passing the blame when realistically, this is all his fault. He could have turned the other way and provided a better life for himself. However, he just got himself killed instead. And we can acknowledge that even though a French philosopher can provide wonderful word, this is something that can be seen as incorrect, for the simple fact that we need to take responsibility for our own actions and not the word of others. We can find that through those being unresponsible for their actions as well as those taking accountability, we can find truth. First, we can acknowledge that in this world, many people do not take accountability for their actions. For many adults in this realm, we are taught from a young age that in order to receive special consequences throughout our life, our actions have consequences. And we can examine this through the cognitive theory of normative conformity as well as the ex-president Donald Trump. Normative conformity is a site where a social cognitive theory where one learns information from others and adapts to their mindset. Whereas some people get their information elsewhere, they get their information from a certain people, a certain group of people, and even though they can think differently, they just go along with the flow. They put their mindset and actions on the word of others and decide to adapt this type of mindset. And if they end up ultimately realizing how irresponsible this was, it was a result of the fact that they ended up going with a word that they're not even sure they believe in. Some people have to understand the fact that they have to have beliefs other than the people they're around, but they end up just adapting. And adapting this mindset can be detrimental. Moving on to the former President Donald Trump, specifically one of his quotations, "I did everything right, and they indicted me." This is the prime example for those not taking responsibility. For someone who's been indicted this many times, you would think they would learn their lesson. However, he continues to lack the responsibility of claiming his actions and proceeding to go the route of being unresponsive. This quotation by Donald Trump, as well as the idea of normative conformity, we can acknowledge that some people are just as unresponsible as the children that are being taught how to be responsible. Just as there are those who are unresponsive, moving on to our next point, we can examine that there are people in this world who are trying to take accountability of their actions and improve the world in a much brighter and better place. Those are the people that were brought up from a young age, taught responsibility, and learned to take action after their consequences. We can examine through the social cognitive theory and performative conformity, as well as through the documentary film The Cove. Informative conformity is the exact opposite of normative conformity. It is where you take information and adapt from your surroundings. Whereas some people simply adapt to what they're around and just stick to their bubble, those with informative conformity conform to what they learn. They broaden their horizons and take accountability for their action and learn their own type of truth. They discover what they want to learn, what they would love to adapt with in a positive way. This is their own choice, and all the more freeing and just a more responsible type of action. We can also move the past to our second and final point, the documentary film The Cove. This film discusses the dolphin industry happening, which this film was released in the 2000s and is still prominent to this day and age. These dolphins are being slaughtered in a cove in Japan for their meat, as well as being sold to places such as SeaWorld. This key character in the documentary film who provides insight was the ex-trainer of the dolphin Skipper. Skipper was a famous dolphin throughout the 70s and ultimately ended up committing suicide because of how depressed Skipper was from being in confinement. The trainer, the day after they held Skipper in their arms as they committed suicide, freed the rest of the dolphins in the area, and ended up going to jail. They've been to jail multiple times. However, they're taking accountability for their actions because they realize by introducing Skipper to this world, they ultimately ended up a lot of other dolphins in this world as well. They realized their mistake and decided to take accountability for their action and try to improve themselves in a better way. So through the idea of Skipper, through the film The Cove, as well as informative conformity, we can acknowledge that people do take responsibility for their actions in a positive way. So through the quotation, history teaches us that no other cause has brought more death than the word of God is incorrect. Some people are so free to pass the blame to others that they cannot acknowledge that they themselves have caused ruin, all the way from President Trump to those taking responsibility, like this Skipper trainer. So even though Syndrome didn't have the best fate, he could have simply changed his fate by taking responsibility for his actions and leading himself to a better path. Would have ended up better for everyone.